Chutes Park, previously mentioned in Root for the home team, which we're talking about because it's eventually where pre-Dodger baseball was played at Chutes Park.
Baseball?
Yeah, baseball. You ever play baseball? I'm calling that base.
Before it was baseball, it was base call.
It was pretty boring, but I still went to every game. I had a favorite team. Chutes Park originally started, as you mentioned before, as a trolley park, and it was at Maine and Washington, near the courthouse that's on Washington, and even closer to that sports museum that I think is closed down, that I always want to go to, but it's never opened because it probably closed down permanently.
What part of town is this?
This is the edge
USC?
of... Yeah, no, it's not USC. It's the outskirts of downtown. It's Washington, Maine, by Trade Tech. It's just like LA.
It's in Los Angeles.
It's in Los Angeles.
What more can I tell you?
It's at the edge of USC area. Like Adams is on the other side.
So it is near USC.
It's not like Expedition Park, though. It's like 2 miles from there.
I think I know where it is. It's the Natural History Museum.
Okay, Washington is 20th Street. So if the Cecil is on Main and 6th, and this is on Main and 20th,
so I have to walk 14 streets.
Got it.
Let me just Google map in my brain. Okay, I got it.
The land was originally owned by a fruit grower named John Lang, and in 1873, it was the site of the Sulphur Springs Hotel. Now, from my understanding, and this is more of a Santa Clarita Valley thing, but because there's a couple of those out there, Sulphur Springs Hotel was a mountain health resort. I'm going to read an ad for it that I found on the SCV history website, so let's see if we can figure it out together. This famous mountain health resort is again ready for guests. The hotel kept on first-class principles. These springs require no comment from me, and as no one has ever claimed to have... You want to read this? As no one has ever claimed to have as good. And as for climate, I can say from 16 years experience right here that I don't believe it can be surpassed upon Earth. That was a hard sentence to say.
It was a hard sentence to listen to.
No, that's not true. Altitude, 1,820 feet. Distance from Los Angeles City, 43 miles on SPRR. North towards San Francisco at Lang Station. Post office, express, telegraph, and ticket offices here. Excursion tickets to and from Los Angeles City, $3.75. Fine hunting grounds, plenty of horses, saddles, and carriages. Everything here that makes life pleasant and desirable. Fruits of all kinds grow here. Very fine flower garden, etc. Charges reasonable. White sulfur, water piped to hotel.
It just sounds like a general relaxation spot. Like I don't know what they're selling.
It's a health resort based on sulfur springs, which I don't know even if they have those in Santa Clarita.
Unless they can use it to make meth, I don't know.
I think it's just like the Earth's meth. It smells like farts and it's hot.
Like how I am when I do meth.
So I'm sure that he didn't have one on Maine and Washington, but he had something similar to it on Maine and Washington that was a Sulphur Springs hotel. Also, according to the website, Lang built a 2-star hotel in 1884 and named it the Sulphur Springs for the smelly water that gurgled up from Santa Clara riverbed.
No, that makes more sense. I believe it all.
Which Lang insisted was a curative for every respiratory ailment short of tuberculosis. And in 1886, he put the entire ranch on the market for $25,000, claiming he was too elderly to deal with it. This could have been the Chutes Park site because should
have gone to the Sulphur Spring. Rejuvenating.
Let me tell you what you need, pal. A taste of your own medicine.
Literally, drink the sulfur.
Put your face in it. Oh no,
drink the sulfur.
This couldn't have been Chutes Park's site because in another ad, it advertising that it was plenty far from Los Angeles, but I could imagine in the late 1880s, he was selling off most of his properties, so he was just selling everything in that point. So Lang then sold his 35-acre lot in 1887 to David Waldron, who partnered with Isaiah Hellman, who Vasquez robbed his bank, and also he was a founding father of USC, and John G. Downey, who's the board on the 6th District Agricultural Association, which will come up. Oh, also he's the 17th governor of California. Oh, also he's a founding father of USC. And the three men together, Waldron, Downey, and Hellman, established a horse-drawn rail that connected the property at 2nd and Main in downtown to Chutes Park for 10 cents. So you can get a ride to the park, 5 cents for the kiddies. Trolley parks, for anybody who doesn't know, were parks that at the end of the trolley line, you can just go and be a member of the community and go and picnic and play games and spend money, give me money. A common day, like we can take a shuttle directly to a place where we're going to go spend money and then they'll shut us back to...
What a racket.
Are you spending money?
Have you spent money yet?
Let me ask you a question. Have you spent money today?
Have you spent your daily bread?
So let's just say this up front. I can't keep track of the names. It seems to have been called Chutes Park first, even before the Chutes ride was there, and later around 1904 it gets called Luna Park, and then again it seems to have been called Chutes Park in 1907 when baseball took over, spoiler alert, and it was called Washington Park, which was around 1911, but there was a mention of it being called McCartney's Washington Gardens in 1917.
That's when the Beatles came around.
Yeah, that's when all the Beatles owned separate teams and Ringo's won and they couldn't figure it out. Waiting for you at the end of the trolley ride were carnival rides, animals, a theater, a ballpark, which make note of. There was things called the House of Trouble, which I imagine was a fun house, and the Cave of Winds, which...
House of Trouble, is that a prison?
There was a merry-go-round that was electric powered, which was state-of-the-art at the time, and there was this engine that pulled boats back up the lake to the tower, which was modern for its time. They had a high balloon ascension, which is like a hot air balloon that just rose up on a rope and then brought you back down. There was a Chutes Theater, and then the Chutes Theater had vaudeville. There was a small pavilion that had weekly variety shows, which had like typical Western song and dances that between the acts, the actresses would go and mingle with the crowds, which sounds dangerous. So animals were a main attraction at Chutes Park. One of them bit Waldron severely on the hand. Remember when we were hanging out and I said, how do you look up an article and you really want to find it? Well, how do you do deep research? And you're like, I don't know. This is what I wanted.
You look on Google.
Did you try Ask Jeeves?
Does Siri know? Then I don't know.
This is what I was trying to find out. What animal bit him on the hand and how bad? And did he yelp like he's
did he cry
George
like
Jetson?
a little baby?
There was a seal pond. There was ostriches.
Probably a seal.
It might have been a seal. Loose seal. There was ostriches. There's burros. There was ponies. And
could have been any. This is the usual suspects. It could have been any of these things.
To be bitten and not have your hand bit off, it's one of these four.
It's got to be a chicken.
Maybe a camel. Main Street was widened at some point.
Imagine getting bit in the hand by a camel.
Usually they spit, which is why I put my hand there. He bit it.
Trying to cover its mouth from spitting.
And just bit my hand.
I'll show you. All camels, I imagine, sound like John Wayne because they all smoke cigarettes. I'll show you.
That's why I never rode a camel. I don't rode horses. Main Street was widened at some point, and with this extra room, Waldron opened up the ostrich farm, moving 41 ostriches.
An ostrich.
It was most certainly an ostrich. He moved 41 more ostriches to be housed in pens among orange trees that Lang had planted at the park. So
what happened to all these ostriches that were around LA?
I think they just flew away.
Sometimes I see packs of wild ostriches flying around. I think those are descendants. But I'm not sure.
Descendants of when the penguins and the one penguin mated with all the ostriches.
The two animals known for flight, penguins and ostriches.
The LA Times called the zoo there no small attraction, although other publications called it modest. I don't know who to believe. This was around the time that they were blown
small. Up. Modest is still not small.
Modest is like humble.
But it's still not small.
It could have been small. Yeah, right. Not small.
But hey,
you're moderately intelligent.
Hey, you're modestly intelligent.
Modestly, you're very modest. There was also apparently an opera house, but it was, from what I read, it was just a glorified honky-tonk saloon.
It's fine with me.
It's called an opera house. There's a bar called Library Bar. I'm like going there.
Because there's a book in there.
Can I check this out?
What's the fine?
$18. There was also a hand-painted panorama of the Battle of Gettysburg, which was created for an 1885 Cotton Centennial Exposition in New Orleans, the New Orleans Exposition. It cost $250,000 and was considered one of the finest panoramas in the U.S. It was
$250,000 in those days.
Yeah, it was 90 feet in diameter. It was apparently one of the most beautiful things that people had seen. But there's barely any pictures of Chutes Park, so I can't imagine there was a picture of the diorama out there. In 1887, our old friend A Purifying Fire bought a ticket to the ride and burned down a 40 by 120 foot pavilion, which was uninsured. The cause of the fire was never discovered.
Ostrich.
Disgruntled ostrich. You can fire me, will you? I'll show you.
I'll set fire to the whole place.
This thing's gonna go up in flames. You watch. Then I'll be right. Then I'll tell you not to lock me in the pen overnight. He had the pavilion rebuilt and put up a white fence around the park, continuing to man the ostriches and the orange grove, the two most important things.
Save the ostriches.
I mean, at the time, that was really probably the two most popular things was ostrich farms and orange groves.
Yeah. Let the seals die. They can live in water. Tell them to stay underwater for a few hours.
Do they like salt water? We have a lot of that. The problem was that people were not seeing the vision of his park that he saw, and there were people going around saying that his park was not a respectable endeavor. The upper tier of society avoided the park. So for the following years, for the July celebrations in 1888, Waldron hired 60 musicians, promised a Vienna buffet, which I cannot figure out what that is. It was probably just a beer garden thing.
It was a bunch of Budweiser and cocktail sausages
floating in the beer. They were scheduled,
as is the Austrian.
They can't get anything right. Scheduled fireworks, and the streetcars would run till 1 a.m. and for the admission price of $50, 50 cents.
That still seems high.
That's
how much it was to get into Busch Gardens in the 60s.
Inflation
and then deflation.
Which is how this podcast runs. The newspapers the next day said the Chinese lanterns made the night seem like fairy tale-like, and attendance was calculated at about 12,000 people.
12,000 peepers, which means about 6,000 people.
Nobody really showed up, but a lot of people were watching. The newspaper still made a jab calling the food overpriced, meaning it was probably like $2. But soon after,
that is overpriced for the late 1800s and today, quite frankly.
You saw me buy a $3 meal for the night. You're like, oof, I could feel that. But soon after that, maybe 1894, 1895, there were many reports that the area was becoming a shanty town, that it was run down. One side of the park was host to a lumber company. Waldron is going through a messy divorce, and operations at the park were sporadic.
Did they go up in flames also?
It seems like they would. It seems like they were supplying the thing to everybody that eventually caught on fire. Across the street is a Sparks factory. Is there a problem here?
On half the park, they were selling lumber, and on the other half they were selling fire.
And right in the middle,
was an ostrich with a vendetta.
I am not going to live here anymore.
I will keep my head in the sand no longer.
What's funny about that is that's what you used to put a fire out.
Ostriches?
Dead ostriches.
Throw on the dead ostriches.
When the park started going to decline through the 1890s and on the brink of the 20th century to 1899, Waldron sold the park and the property to the Los Angeles County Improvement Company, who by 1901 added 2 new additions, a 4,000-seat theater and a 10,000-seat baseball diamond, as opposed to just letting the Vernon Tigers or the Los Angeles Angels of the Pacific Coast League play on an empty field before the park got packed. The 3rd edition was the big deal. The nationally revered ride was the invention of a man named Paul Boynton, who introduced the ride.
Boynton?
Boynton, who introduced the ride at Coney Island Pier. The ride was the Shoot the Chutes ride, which we've talked about many times.
Yeah.
What it is, for anybody who hasn't heard, is starting here. Shoot the Chutes is a very long water slide starting from a 75-foot tower in the sky and sliding on a toboggan down a 300-foot ramp. And at the end of this is a 50 by 150-foot pond to splash into. They had one at the old pier, one of the Venice piers. A kid fell off of it, and then they had to close the pier down or something like that. The new park also offered a Japanese tea house, a bowling alley, a shooting gallery. There's a children's area with a goat, which also bites people, and a pony ride also bites people. Zoological garden, we'll get to that.
And a bite garden.
A place to get your hand bit. I got my foot bit.
A good
I want
place
my
to
money
get your
back.
hand bit.
There was picnic areas, and there was a restaurant. There was also a sea lion on duty as a star attraction at the park, and it was billed as a monster sea lion.
What?
Yeah, it's just a sea lion. They're just trying to make another nickel. They also had
A slightly large sea lion.
he was just kind of fat. They also had the Catalina Marine Band playing for the park. Later that year, the park's attractions kept expanding. They added 3 African lions to the zoo.
Oh my God.
I hope that didn't bite Waldron. At one point, the zoo contained something which was called boxing bears.
Oh.
Do you think that they're
It has
literally
to be.
bears that were...
What else could it be? Unless it's big hairy men, what else could it be? I mean, obviously big hairy men are the people that box, but what else could it be than 2 bears with gloves on?
2 brown
and
bears
shorts? Yeah.
in shorts. And they need them to come back to the corners.
Floyd Berryweather
my
and Conor McGregor Bear. It was the fight of the century. I swear to God, it was the fight of the century.
Everybody was talking about it.
Even the loser got paid millions in salmon, so we're all suckers.
Like they're sucking off the heads of those salmon. And the final edition...
Boxing bear. I'd love to see that.
Me too. It seems like they would be wearing fezzes and riding small bikes and punching
Well,
each
that's how
other.
they get into the ring. In this corner, a bear. In this corner, a bear.
And there's another animal as their coach in the corner, which is like a boar or something.
It's one of my speed boars.
Yeah. The final addition to this new zoo was a blood-sucking vampire bat. We can move on. No joke there. At night, he became Nosferatu. Anyways, if we're wondering why there was an epidemic of vampires in Los Angeles in 1899, it was maybe because...
It was all just a sham to get Dracula snuggled into the country.
Listen, we're going to get you in America. We get it. We know you're a master overlord. You're a thing of another realm, but you got to take this job.
You got to start from the ground up, okay?
If you want to be a CEO, you got to start the mail boy. You know this.
In this case,
Dracula?
you work in a zoo.
There was a fishing pond added. There was a circus act called the Flying Venus who did aerial stunts under hypnosis.
What?
And there was a theater expanded to hold 1,400 people so they could view burlesque, va-va-voom, comedy, ha-ha.
Oh, that's funny.
Acrobats, wow-wee, oh wow, contortionists, ugh,
Ow.
ugh, gross. Get a real job.
My spleen.
Jugglers, drop it. Drop it. And singers, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. There was also a beer garden, of course.
Glug, glug, glug.
Oh, my stomach.
Oh, God, why did
farting
my
a lot.
family leave me?
I'm only 10. 2 years later, in 1903, they added a still-framed figure-8 roller coaster. There was a small railroad that rode alongside the park. There was a small circus. There was a den of serpents.
What?
Yeah, Indiana Jones, when he was a young man, fell into it. Before that, he was like, I'm okay with... They're just a snake. And then after that, he was like, oh, snakes.
Oh, and that's why he's afraid of boxing bears also.
I hate boxing bears, Chuck.
Why did it have to be boxing bears? They open up the tomb. Bears. Boxing
I
bears.
hate them. They were feeling so good that in 1904, they built the Chutes Park on the daily programs that they were printing as the largest amusement grounds in the Great West.
It sounds like it. It sounds pretty impressive.
I mean, there was nothing in Arizona, so maybe. San Francisco was just sad at the time. It was just industry and fog. Oh,
The
let's
fog
start a
was
San
their
Francisco
industry.
podcast and call it Mystery and Fog. Not even say mystery the first time. In 1910, the park was sold to new owners, one of whom was amusement park pioneer Frederick Ingersoll, and reopened as Luna Park. This new group kept much the same amusements going on, but added Nemo's Trip to Slumberland ride based off of Winsor McKay's comic strip, which was really popular. The ride was $75,000. It was a scenic railroad that ran the entire park along Main Street.
Where are they getting this money from?
I don't know. It's 1910. That's like $80 million.
Yeah.
The state of California costs less than that. The Chutes ride was remodeled at this point to be more a scenic water slide called Shoot the Rapids, because I guess Shoot the Chutes was not popular anymore.
Yeah, rapids are cool.
Trust me, I read the demographics. I read Tiger Beat. Rapids are in. Chutes
I read
out.
Tiny Tim Beat.
Luna Park also had a dancing pavilion, Tony Ryder's Monkey Circus, I can only, Billakini's Temple of Mirth, which was a fun house that was described as a crazy house, an outdoor skating rink, the House of Hilarity.
Is that where they do comedy also?
Yeah, it was like an open mic. There was 2 vaudeville theaters. There was a balloon ride called The Big Captive. There's a circle swing, which is my absolute favorite ride.
What's a circle swing?
You hang on the hanging, and it
goes
spins you around. Yeah,
like they have it or they used to have at the California
They
Adventure?
still have it there. Yeah,
Okay,
it's like orange.
The one that breaks all the time.
Stop. Why? Because they launch people out into the pond? No.
People use it as a way to escape to get into Disneyland. Jump.
Jump. And they added more animals.
Winnie
to
the Pooh will catch me.
Catch me.
Winnie the Pooh will catch you if he catches you trying to sneak in.
That's his job there. That's how he keeps his job. He's
The
security.
enforcer.
Don't let him find your honey, whatever that means. They added more
Brain
animals
honey.
to the zoo. He's a zombie, by the way. They added more animals to the zoo. No more boxing bears.
Honey.
They added an elephant and several camels. Imagine being in a part of California where you could just see an elephant. Like you just pay like 25 cents. Well,
there's a zoo.
Opening day of Luna Park was on June 10th of 1911, and they saw an evening crowd of about 16,000 honest folk. They also held free daily entertainment. They had shows like the Wild West show, which is weird to me because the Wild West was only like 40 years before that.
They were in the Wild West.
Yeah, it's like us having like a World War II show in the 80s. Like we had Hogan's Hero in the 80s. See, that's weird to me.
Hogan's Heroes?
Yeah, Hogan's Heroes is weird. It's weird that they didn't give a lot of time before they're like, let's make a TV show about this.
Well, even let the listener know, in these months I've been watching a lot of Monty Python, and that was the late 60s and early 70s, and like every other joke is about Nazis, and like in full Nazi uniform, and this was 20 years after the events.
It was still not gross yet. It was so kind of cool.
Yeah, it was so cool.
It was so cool.
It was so cool when Terry
1951.
Gilliam dressed up as a Nazi.
If you dressed up like a Nazi in 1951, I think people would get it. Over the next year, they kept adding and replacing.
It's cool again now.
Over the next year, they kept adding and replacing rides of pretty much the same caliber, trying to spark more interest and get more families to come through without really having to do much work. They could have attracted a lot of people. This is around the time that agricultural park closed, spoiler alert. Whether it was a financial failure or not is hard to say according to the first-hand researchers that did the real work on this. But Luna Park was sold in September of 1912 to a syndicated company listed in one reading as the Los Angeles, get ready for the word, Negroes, with the intention of using in the park.
Why'd you have to go there?
I didn't. It's what they were called. It was the title of the syndication.
These are Greg's views.
Oh boy. Right after the Nazi stuff too. This does not look good. This doesn't look good.
Rewind it all. I'm going to change it to, I don't know, socialists.
Democratic socialists. They got the park with the intention of turning the park into a place where the African American community can go and have fun for the day and not have to deal with the segregation and only get to go to the pool one day out of the week. They would have been worthy of celebration if it had worked, but it did not. And they had to sell the park in December of that year to Harry Berry and Eddie Mayer,
who was a bear, who used to be a boxer in the park.
He got promoted because he won so many fights.
What's your name? Harry Berry.
Hey, Marvin Berry. You know that new cousin of... It was Harry Berry, my cousin? Yeah, it is actually.
You know that new bear boxer you're looking for?
Is it Harry, my cousin? Yeah. Oh.
Oh, yeah, I know him.
He's a good man. He comes highly recommended.
Good bear.
Don't let him get near the sauce. They were owners.
The honey sauce?
Yeah, don't let him get near honey.
Winnie the Pooh was a bear.
And so much brain damage from all those fights. Harry Berry and Eddie Mayer were owners of a local brewery and a baseball team. These two guys knocked down all the buildings and the rides, and then the Chutes Baseball Park took over everything when Washington Park was erected, which was an even more fitting baseball park with a genuine infield and vast, accurate dimensions. What wasn't used as a ballpark became the Horsley and Bostic Zoo, which opened in 1914. The amusement park area closed in 1914. Baseball is now what that park is mostly remembered for.
Hasteling and Bosley Zoo?
Horsley and Bostic Zoo was the
What is
zoo.
that?
It was zoo, I imagine, with the remaining.
zoo.
It was zoo. It was zoo and I. It was a park with the remaining animals, I suppose, and it was used up in the part of the lot that baseball didn't need. They're like, well, we have a dugout, and we have bleachers, and then behind us is a bunch of lions.
They're
who got
not
out.
getting those foul balls. That's where the Sandlot came from.